I had James Tallarico on the podcast, and one of the things that I think he has a really good point about, even though I know you're Catholic and you're very religious, putting the Ten Commandments in schools, I don't think is the right way to do it. And this is a guy, Tallarico, who was in seminary and is very Christian. Mm-hmm. He just thinks that even though he believes in the Ten Commandments, if you're just only representing the Christian faith in these schools, you're forcing your religion into other people's lives, and that this is going to push people away from Christianity rather than encourage them to pursue it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you never want to force things on people, and I do. I think one of the core Christian contributions to Western civilization is the idea of freedom of religion. It's actually very much a Christian idea because you recognize the dignity of each individual. And part of recognizing that dignity is that each person has to find their own pathway to God. You can't force this on anybody. I don't think putting the Ten Commandments up in school is like forcing things on anybody.
But it's public schools. So, I mean, if you're going to do that, why not put Buddhist scripture? Why not put, Muslim stuff? You could make an argument why you should have a bunch of different religious tenets in schools.
I think in the Supreme Court there actually are a lot of different sort of historical, cultural, legal documents that are up there. And I want to say that Moses coming down with a tablet is one of them. But I think there actually are other cultural, maybe even other religious elements of this, like where you recognize that a big part of sort of the law-giving tradition in Western civilization is is some of these religious texts, not exclusively Christian religious texts. Obviously, some Jewish. There's like an important contribution from the Muslim world in this. So I guess I don't think of it as exclusionary, while also recognizing that America is a society. Our founders were people who were very much influenced, even if they weren't Christians. A lot of them, of course, were, but were very influenced by Christian culture and articulating American law. So my argument would be, even if you're not a Christian, like, does seeing the Ten Commandments, let me put it a slightly different way. Does seeing the Ten Commandments force religion on a non-Christian child? I mean, my argument would be no, and I'd illustrate this by saying, well, there are all of these ways in which you actually could try to force religion on a child, right?
Well, it's not the worst way to force religion on a child, but to have it and not represent any other religion. This is Texas, by the way.
Sure.
So what he's talking about was that there's these Christian nationalists, these guys that are very wealthy, that are trying to fund Christian schools and trying to defund public schools or any other kind of religious school. And what they want to do, and they passed this, to get the Ten Commandments in all public school classes. And he's fundamentally opposed to that as a Christian because he thinks it's going to force people to have this in their class, and it's going to push people away from Christianity.
I mean, I understand the argument. I just don't see it that way. I mean, I guess if
I kind of agree with them.
I hear you, but if I'm a non-religious student and I'm sitting in there and I see the Ten Commandments, at the very least, I think I can appreciate it. I mean,
okay, but what if you're
I talk about this in my book. I went through sort of
What if you're a Hindu? What if you're a Muslim, and you are seeing that represented, but not your faith?
Well,
it's a public school.
First of all, I think that I'm pretty sure Muslims, I'm not hardly an expert on Islam, but I think all of the Abrahamic faiths recognize the Ten Commandments as like a significant thing. But I think if I was a Hindu looking at the Ten Commandments, I mean, again, it's hard for me to say this, right, from my perspective, but I certainly went through an atheist phase in my youth. And what I would see that as a non-religious person or a different religion is I would say this is like an important cultural element of the Western civilization, which is the foundation of the classroom that I'm sitting in. And this idea that the law comes and is sort of above any man, even if you don't believe in God yourself, I think that's like an important concept. I mean, if you look at the Ten Commandments, probably 8 of them are something that I would hope that everybody would agree with, even if they're not themselves religious. So I guess here's my view on it. Like, I would not be offended if I sat in a classroom as a Christian, or if my kids sat in a classroom as a Christian and saw a religious text that wasn't Christian on the wall. I would encourage them to see that. No, I'd encourage them to see that as a learning experience, to try to understand
What if it was
things.
from the Quran? What if a bunch of
I guess it depends on what it was, right? If
Right,
if it's like something crazy, but no, I mean, if it's something that is like culturally interesting, I guess I don't have a problem with my kid reading
because
something.
the problem is it's mandated. Like if you have a classroom and the teacher is Christian and the teacher wants to have it in their classroom, maybe that's one thing. But if you're mandating that you're going to have the 10 Commandments in classrooms, that's a different thing because now you're pushing Christianity on kids. And this is Tallarico's position. And as a Christian, he's saying, I think this is going to push children away from Christianity.
So I understand what he's saying. I think that part of living in a society where you have different people with different perspectives, but you do have, I mean, Christianity is the majority religion of the United States. It is the religion that was extraordinarily influential to our founding, to the constitutional principles. Again, freedom of religion is itself not really a liberal concept. It was originally derived from a Christian idea about free will and the dignity of the person. I think part of that is that you accept that you're going to have exposure to different things, and if a state legislator in a majority Christian state wants to, it's not like they're putting the 10 Commandments in front of these kids and saying, you have to read this and write it 500 times a day. They're exposing kids to something, and I'm comfortable with kids being exposed to a lot of different things. I think that's part of living in a society where there's a free exchange of ideas. And what I worry about with Tallarico's sort of perspective here is again, I'm not saying that I don't want kids to be exposed to anything that is outside of the Christian canon. Like I actually want my kids exposed to things. I write about this in the book that I think it's important to have a grounded enough faith that you can engage with a lot of different ideas and still ultimately, sort of hold on to your Christian faith. But isn't part of just living in a like pluralistic democracy that people are going to be exposed to different things? And I would kind of put it on Tallarico in a slightly different way, that for a long time in this country, there were actually Supreme Court rulings that said that you cannot pray in a school, even a student organization led by the students, or that you cannot put the 10 Commandments up, even a teacher who chose to do it in their own classroom. And so I think you're always kind of trying to strike this balance, given that we have the First Amendment in this country, between allowing the practice of religious faith in public spaces and possibly forcing religion on other people. I think you have to strike that balance the right way. I guess I just say is that if the 10 Commandments being in a classroom is the thing that you think is forcing religion on somebody, was he equally offended when the 10 Commandments were like quite literally prohibited from being listed in a public building?
I don't know if he was offended by that or if he was opposed to that. But the idea of being exposed to it is one thing. It being mandatory is another. And to mandate that in classrooms is a different thing because you're clearly promoting Christianity. And his position is that promoting Christianity in that way is going to have an opposite effect on children. You're pushing it on them. Instead, you're not just exposing it to them, you're pushing it on them. And especially if you're pushing it on children who come from a household that has a different faith.
I guess I just think the balance in our country the last 30, 40 years has actually been much more in the other direction, which is that we try to completely remove religion from the public square. And I think that poses its own problems because, people practice their faith in all kinds of ways.
But don't you think that that's the responsibility of churches and synagogues and wherever that, like, if you want, and in the community, if you want to promote religion, promote it that way. But promoting in public schools should be just educational. And if you're in a religious class and a class is teaching about religion, that's a different story.
Well, you're right. It's certainly the responsibility of churches and synagogues and mosques and so forth. But I also think that, the late Supreme Court Chief Justice William Rehnquist sort of said this, that if your approach to religion in public life always and everywhere is to push it out of the public square, then you're actually embracing a religion of your own in the public square, which is secularism. You're just taking one religion and replacing it with secularism. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm kind of comfortable with people of different faiths sharing the public square together. But part of that is that if I'm in a 95% Christian community and my local city council wants to put up a nativity display on Christmas Eve, I'm okay with that. And that was actually, like, for a long time in our country, actually prohibited.
Yeah.
And so what I think is that we sort of put ourselves in this frame in this country where we said every public display of religion is somehow illegitimate. But I mean, I don't know. I try to live my faith in a way that's consistent across different spheres of my life. I don't preach to people. I don't like walk into the White House, tell my employees, you need to follow Jesus as your Lord and Savior. I just try to live my life in a way that hopefully makes people a little curious about what motivates me and what inspires me. But I also don't think that the expectation should be that we tell religious people they're not allowed to be religious in the public square. Because I think that's what we've done over the last 30 or 40 years. I guess, we can agree to disagree. I see the Texas thing as an attempt to correct that.